Thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. When you think about branding, cities and communities have a brand as well, and much of that can be affected by its history in race relations and civil rights. Corporate brands today often feel more comfortable to weigh in also on the changing diversity in our society, but interjecting race can be a challenge if not done correctly. Beverly Robertson is a former corporate marketing executive, a marketing agency co-founder, the former president of the National Civil Rights Museum, and now the interim CEO of the Memphis Chamber of Commerce, and she's also a subject matter expert in race relations as well as civil rights. And on this episode, we'll discuss how to rebuild the brand of a major metropolitan area, achieve amazing corporate partnerships, how to look at race through a perspective not necessarily of your own, and how to help people of color progress into more leadership roles in marketing. So let's tune in to a city's brand ambassador with a metropolitan shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Beverly, thank you so much for joining us on A Shark's Perspective today. If you would tell us a little bit about your background and career thus far.
Sure. Thanks first of all for having me, Kenneth, on your podcast. My roots are deep and wide in Memphis. I taught in the Memphis City school system right after I graduated from college. And by the way, I went to Memphis State University. It's now called University of Memphis.
Go
So
Tigers.
that speaks to how long ago that must have been. After my stint in the system, I went to corporate America and worked for about 19 years at the headquarters of Holiday Inn Worldwide, and really left the organization when Bass PLC out of London bought Holiday Inn and moved the worldwide headquarters to Atlanta, Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
and most of it ultimately back to London. Um, Even during that time, toward the later years of my tenure at Holiday Inn, my husband and I had decided that we wanted to launch our own marketing and PR business, which we did in the early 90s.
Because you were in marketing
And
and PR at Holiday Inn as well.
I was,
Right.
I was our marketing, PR, communications, and had experience in several areas: marketing research, strategic planning, etc. But my last jobs were really in the marketing and PR area. Um, I also came over to the business after I left Holiday Inn Worldwide. So I was working at Trust Marketing and Communications when I was approached by two individuals who are on the board of the National Civil Rights Museum. And I spent about 17 years at the National Civil Rights Museum through one expansion, one major renovation, and raising $44 million to support this now global iconic institution. And leaving there in 2014 to retire, came back into my own business, Trust Marketing Communications. And more recently, I've been tapped as the interim president and CEO of the Greater Memphis Chamber of Commerce.
So you're like the Godfather, or or the Godmother of Memphis. Every time you try to get out, they keep pulling you back in. So, well,
Well, it's a great place to be pulled into.
no kidding. Your career. I love somebody that's got the credentials of being in a marketing role at a major brand, having been
Hmm.
president of the National Civil Rights Museum, started your own agency, and you're the Chamber of Commerce director. You're just going to have to go back and work on your resume a little bit and build up your credentials before you come on this show. But I know that you told me offline that appearing on my podcast was your personal pinnacle of success, and I really appreciate you saying though.
Absolutely.
I really
Make no
appreciate you saying
mistake.
that, even though I just made it up. So at least as far as the Chamber of Commerce goes, and now that you're the interim president and CEO of the Memphis Chamber of Commerce, and just for setup to the rest of the audience nationally and internationally, since most audiences from outside of Memphis, I'll offer a little bit of background and context. In 2018, the former chamber president, was outside in the downtown area when he was shot and killed while as a target of a robbery, and he had led billions of dollars in investment in Memphis. And long story short, they appointed you, and obviously the circumstances were tragic. However, I can't think of a better brand ambassador to go help market a major metropolitan city. So congratulations to you. And what I'd kind of like to talk about to start is, how does a city go about like this fixing its brand? I mean, it's been 50 years since Dr. King's assassination. The former chamber president, who was basically the marketing president, if you will, and
Hmm.
business development director for a business community, is killed. And there are so
Hmm.
many good things to promote in our city. You're basically the CMO of a city now and a marketing expert. How do we go about fixing this?
Well, I think we certainly have to tout our assets and our amenities, much as the Convention and Visitors Bureau does to tourists. We've got to do the same to businesses that we're seeking to attract. But I also think that but in addition to that and in tandem with that, we've got to fix some of the concerns that have been problems just over the years. I mean, I think clearly while Memphis has a lot of assets and is a lovely city and has great people and wonderful historical attractions, I do think that we have a problem with poverty in the inner
Mm-hmm.
city. So in order for companies to really view it as the most attractive place for them to locate their new businesses, I think we've got to deal with that issue. We've got to understand what it is going to take to alleviate or minimize some of the poverty that this area is experiencing. Some of it's being experienced because people are moving to the suburbs, are moving to the south, because we're sort of a tri-state area. So
Mm-hmm.
that means we're surrounded by Arkansas, Mississippi, and other parts of Tennessee. So some of that is going on, but essentially, I think this problem is perhaps rooted in the fact that there are a number of minority businesses who who actually need to receive greater contracting opportunities. We need better training on the vocational side. We need to look at public policies that continue to oppress, in many ways, policies that were designed to improve have had the negative or the opposite effect. So we've got to tackle this problem on all fronts. We've got to tackle it on the education front. We got to tackle it on the economic development front. But you can't really bring new businesses in if we don't have a significant base of trained and qualified individuals who can take advantage of the opportunities that these companies will create. And I think that for many years, I think that we have focused a great degree on K through 12 education, but we probably have not spent as much time focusing on vocational education or the crafts, electricians, plumbers, welders, aircraft mechanics, which are really, really good positions that pay way above a living wage. So
Mm-hmm.
I think we would tackle it on a multiplicity of fronts to help grow the brand, make it more identifiable, and make sure that it is such that people will want to come to Memphis.
Well, when you think about it, I mean, you're spot on, especially when you think of how Amazon, when they began looking at new cities for their alternative Amazon headquarters, you think about how the red carpet was rolled out, by every city in the country who wanted to market themselves to look at that opportunity, and it's almost in a similar way how companies put when an RFP is put out, you put your best foot forward, but ultimately it comes down to your core product that speaks to it. And Memphis has, as you said, a lot of poverty and things like that it's got to deal with.
Hmm.
Then I think other than people always have to remember though, other than having the best barbecue on the planet, sorry Kansas City, and it's the rightful birthplace of rock and roll, sorry Cleveland, Memphis is an emerging market
Hmm.
with no state income tax. I mean, there's a lot of things going for in the city. Let's talk then a little bit about the museum again. You were in it again at the time. You were again an interim when you were asked to become the interim executive director of the National Civil Rights Museum, and then spent your 17 years as a museum leader and president. And you raised 44 million, as you said earlier, during your tenure, and built the annual Freedom Awards to global prominence, including visiting President Nelson Mandela in his South African home, which must have been amazing. To personally appeal to him to attend the ceremony, you helped lead the museum to world-class status, in USA Today even named it as one of the world's top 10 most iconic sites. So, Other than an amazing learning opportunity, as museums generally are, for many people it's also a vacation. They plan around it. And for a lot of
Hmm.
families, those dollars are limited. So, what do you do in order to compete against other tourist attractions, other museums, and even other iconic places, and even against in your own city, that to make what became recognized as one of the top 10 iconic sites in the world and a must see attraction?
Yeah. Well, the beauty is that unfortunately, history happened at that
Yeah,
place.
agreed.
It it didn't happen somewhere else. It happened right there on the site. So that within itself makes us very unique. There are not many places where something like that has happened, and that site, not especially not in this country. There may be many more abroad, but where you take the historic fact that something tragic may have happened there, but you can create an educational learning opportunity. You can take it from a site of great tragedy and really turn it into an educational triumph. And I think that's what the individuals who are the visionary leaders behind it had. So, number one, we have something no place else can have,
Sure.
no other city in the world can have. And so we have taken that tremendous asset and converted it, or as many business people say, we've monetized it because we're giving people a taste of history that they can never find anyplace else. And we take the story of the civil rights movement from 1619, not from the 60s, but when Africans arrived on the shores of America. We take the story from there and we chronologically take people on a journey vicariously through the seminal events and individuals who were involved in the movement. Then we end up talking about the modern day struggle and the modern day slavery and the modern day movement. So we bring it from 1619, we bring it all the way up to contemporary times. We also deal with things such as the Freedom Award individuals, the conspiracy theories that were around the death of Dr. King. We deal with the legacy of the movement, which is really significant, and people don't understand and ask. They ask us, why did people struggle, fight, bleed, and die? What was that really all about?
Sure.
Well, it wasn't just about slavery. It was about the gains that developed or resulted from people struggling to change laws that were oppressive,
Hmm.
Jim Crow practices that were oppressive. So it was a comprehensive movement that other countries in the world look to as an example for them.
Yeah, and obviously where Dr. King was killed out on the second floor there at the motel, is it only happened there, but really the work you did in helping build the inside museum where you walk through and learn so much. Really, it's a race relations history lesson that you get in a few hours. It's an amazing. But obviously the hotel's history is built around the great works of Dr. King and the struggles this country has seen with race relations. And with there still being so very far to go, how did you help market and develop that broader audience appeal? And I say that, even from a revenue standpoint, because any museum needs a diverse crowd of people to support it with funds just to keep the doors open. I mean, it's a product, if you will, that everyone needs, but it's good luck convincing a lot of people on occasion, how to believe something different.
Yeah, well, I think that the place itself is so compelling
Hmm.
and so powerful that when people come in, they don't know what to expect. But when they go out, they have had a very emotional and visceral experience.
Agreed.
So they might have come in one way, but I can promise you that the majority of them leave a different person. And I have had more than one conversation about that because they realize that we're all human beings, and they also realize that the movement wasn't just an African American or black people or brown people's movement. There were Jewish people and Native Americans
Exactly.
and Asians who joined the movement. So the truth of the matter is that everyone who steps through those doors can find their voice right there at the National Civil Rights Museum. So it connects
Couldn't
in
agree
a
more.
very different way. The other thing we did is we built strategic alliances which were because we didn't have a big, when I was there, I didn't have a big budget. We hadn't done a big renovation like the one we finished in 2014. So it was really a struggle because we had a marketing budget for a national museum of about $70,000. Well, that's nothing.
Wow.
That's nothing. So we had to use our creativity and our expertise to be able to form strategic alliances. We formed one with the NBA, National Basketball Association, which allowed us to make King Day, the holiday, the centerpiece of the NBA and was nationally televised for several years, featuring Memphis, Tennessee, and the Grizzlies. We also worked with the Basketball Association in this country because what we did is they saw our Freedom Award of the event and they decided that they wanted to, at a pivotal game over the course of the year, do something very similar on the field. So they were engaged with us. We built relationships with Nike. We had lots of corporate partnerships. And we could not have done it without that. We had a whole cadre of volunteers who were dedicated to all of the principles on which we stood at the National Civil Rights Museum. So it took a combination of variables, factors, relationships for us to be able to elevate the profile from that of a local or regional institution to a global iconic site.
Yeah, it's partnership marketing 101, and I can't
Yes.
think of anywhere that did it better. Then let's shift a little bit and talk a little bit further about corporate brands. And so from a brand standpoint, when do you think it's okay to interject race as part of a brand's identity? And I ask that sort of on the heels of your question about describing how well you did with the NBA. But if you think of the NFL and everything that happened with Colin Kaepernick and with Nike, it's become sort of a hot button, if you will, as far as introducing that into your marketing. When a brand takes a stance like this, it can be good and bad for the brand that they're trying to market. Obviously, Nike's seen a lot of things happen, but when do you think it's okay for a brand to interject race as part of a discussion?
Well, I think it really depends on the brand. And in the case of Nike recently, I would say that that was more a rights issue or a social justice
Sure.
issue that people took for a race issue.
Good
And it
point.
depends on who's looking at the brand. Because if you are a company and you know that your primary audience is of a certain race, then you want to identify with the values of that audience. And so when you can identify with the values of that audience, and maintain a measure of your general market audience, then it might be appropriate. But I think it's challenging if all we're doing is interjecting race. I
Hmm.
think the messaging has to be a lot stronger than just race because I think looking at race in and of itself, I think that makes it a very challenging story to tell. But if there's a bigger story, if there is something that is wrapped around that story that really can connect with broader audiences, then I think that is appropriate. I think it becomes difficult if we're going to restrict it just to race.
Are you seeing any brands handle race well?
Well, I think it depends on who you are. I think there are people who would say that that Nike did a pretty decent job
Good
of
point.
doing it. I think when you and I think if you happen to be African American and you believe that people have a right to express themselves within certain parameters, and if you see the person that has expressed themselves be treated as if they were a pariah when others have done things far worse than that, and you believe that there is little justice in that and that was undeserved, then you might say that Nike has stepped out and stood by the courage of their convictions, and therefore you might run out and buy 10 pair of their tennis
Sure.
shoes.
Sure.
So I think So I think that, you know, we see things through different lenses.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody that might be different from Colin might view that as a slap in their face. That was not what he said. That wasn't his intention. He was simply doing something that he felt compelled to do, not unlike those leaders in the movement when people told them, you can't do that, you won't do that. And there was a great deal of civil disobedience. Sometimes, in order to win rights, you have to do things that's not popular. Like, you got to remember, what's popular is not always right, and what's right is not always popular.
Exactly.
So, we need to understand as a society that we need to appreciate people's differences and try to understand that we're not monolithic. We
Hmm.
don't see things through the same lens. Our experiences that we have had historically and throughout our lives shape who we are and what we think. And I think the onus is on each of us to try to be much more understanding, much more empathetic, try to understand the underlying issues that will drive people to do some of the things that they do, as opposed to looking at it through our lens. And that's a very narrow lens if it's just our lens and you don't have any other perspective or any other value system to compare that to. That's very dangerous. That's a very narrow perspective.
Amen. So then let's shift a little bit towards employment. Personally, I tend to believe that we've come a long way with diversity, at least in gender in marketing. I feel like I know as many women in marketing roles as I do men. I mean, I know the show Mad Men, if you think of it from that perspective, was set so many years ago, and that's the way everything was. But we've got a more diverse group of people, men and women today. But however, even after working with some of the biggest agencies, biggest national agencies there are, still am not seeing a lot of diversity in race, and would like to know what's your view on how we get more diversity with people of color in marketing roles, or all roles, but also marketing leadership roles.
hmm I have seen that too. There is not very much at all at the top of these major mega agencies. Well,
Well,
I think
think
there are a
even at
couple
the
of
local level. You started an agency here, you and your husband,
right,
and
right.
there are not a lot of African American owned marketing agencies in most cities.
Well, part of that is because usually African American agencies are shut out or bought out. And it becomes very hard for someone. If you come into the marketing business in any given city, you better be able to finance your business for the next 3 years, because there is no given that you're going to be able to have contracts that will support your staff, your overhead, the people who are viewed as those who would execute your projects. And I think part of it is that there hasn't really been a real appreciation of what African American marketers bring to the table. Although some of the hottest things that go on are things that mimic Black people. You can look at clothing, you can look at hairstyles, you can look at music. It's not uncommon to see lots of other folks bumping the music or knowing the raps or doing chants. It's not uncommon at all to see that and hear that. But there is there seems to be more of an intentionality to not allow African Americans to enter agencies at the upper level. So what happens is African Americans in marketing, you'll find a whole group of them across America in major corporations making major decisions about major product lines,
Hmm.
rather than on the advertising agency side. Plus, there's a lot that's happening with individual agencies, period, in this country. The reason that we have fewer ad agencies locally than we used to have 10 years ago is because the marketplace has changed. Larger agencies are eating up, gobbling up smaller agencies, and the mom and pop agencies, it's very hard for them to even compete when there is a pitch, because people want to know, are you scalable? Do you have enough capacity to be able to handle this business?
Hmm.
So a lot has happened. And then with 2008, for those agencies that could not weather the storm, they are out of business. They had to
Agreed.
shutter their businesses and close their doors because they were not able to make it because they just couldn't deal with the magnitude of the issues as it related to, um, you know, selling their products and having the people to be able to work their products. So it became a tremendous challenge. So, in addition to the external forces out there, and then the consolidation of the business of marketing into the hands of a few huge agencies, I think it has become a challenge for African Americans. So either you start your own business or you go to corporate and you work in marketing there. That's where you'll find a lot of high level African Americans.
Beverly, it is now time to ask you the five most important questions of the day. Are you ready?
Yes.
Elvis or B.B. King?
Hmm. Pass.
You've got your, you can't have your politician hat on. You've got to have your Chamber of Commerce hat on.
Well, I like both, to be honest with you. And I think both Elvis and B.B. King, in their own right, created genres of music that will long be played far beyond my lifetime and yours as well. Elvis, on the one hand, was a musician who took much of his gyration and his moves from African American artists during that time. B.B. King captured the hearts and minds of America with his guitar Lucille and the way he sang his songs. So I think both have had a tremendous impact on the society in which we live. And I think it's tough to choose between those kinds of iconic artists. I really do.
Good luck when you run for political office, by the way. Sounds like a. So here's the next one: mashed potatoes or sweet potatoes?
Mashed potatoes, definitely.
Chamber of Commerce or Harry Potter's Chamber of Secrets?
I take the commerce.
Powerball question: lump sum or annual payments?
Lump sum.
And the most important question: biscuits or cornbread?
Cornbread.
Well, Beverly, I cannot thank you enough. I'm honored that you took the time to spend with us today. Where can people find out more about you, the Chamber, follow your advice and thoughts?
Pretty soon. I won't be assuming the job until January, but certainly now you can find me at Trust Marketing, trustmkt.com. That's my website. And of course, you can always go to the Chamber of Commerce, Greater Memphis Chamber of Commerce website. And I am certain that if you're looking for me, they know where to find me.
Thank you, Beverly, again so much for being on A Shark's Perspective.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. I really appreciate talking to you. I've had fun.
So there was my conversation with Beverly Robertson, the former corporate marketing executive, a marketing agency co-founder, former president of the National Civil Rights Museum, and now the interim CEO of the Memphis Chamber of Commerce, and she's also a subject matter expert in race relations as well as civil rights. Let's take a look at three key takeaways from our conversation with her. First, as Beverly said, interjecting race into a brand's discussion can be a challenging story to tell. Identifying the values of your audience is key. If there is a bigger story and something wrapped around that story that can really connect with a broader audience, then it can be appropriate. Second, even when you're talking about race as it applies to marketing, I so agree with her point in that we see things through different lenses. When you look at Colin Kaepernick and Nike and the NFL, there's a reason why people see things through another perspective and another lens. It's on each of us to be more understanding, empathetic, and to understand the underlying issues instead of looking at it through your own personal lens only. Appreciate another person's lens because their life lessons are very different than yours. Third, I highly encourage everyone listening to this to visit the National Civil Rights Museum at the site where Dr. King was killed. Not only can you appreciate the achievements of Beverly's team and the fundraising that went into marketing such an iconic institution, but you'll also have an emotional and visceral experience. As she said, the movement wasn't just about African Americans. Everyone who steps through those doors can find their voice at the National Civil Rights Museum. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. I'm honored that you took the time to listen to our conversation regarding another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. In closing, there's so many profound quotes from Dr. King, but here's one that I enjoy. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? I hope you join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.